publishing. So I'm going to talk to you about publishing strategically to enhance your research impact. So just some questions I suppose to consider before I suppose you'd approach the whole area of publishing. But the most important thing is, why do you want to publish? Very important, obviously. What's your motivation behind it? What do you want to publish? How many papers, for example, from a given research project? Are you required to produce a certain number of papers? So some academics, there might be an environment where you're kind of required to produce a certain number of papers. So that might be a consideration. Quantity versus quality, which is more important. So there is a tendency to, I suppose, produce an awful lot of papers, but then the quality is an issue as well. So, and ultimately the quality is going to override it, because the quality is what's going to get you citations and being noted as a academic in a certain field. So that's important to consider. Where do you want to publish? Which journal should you submit to? And what is the basis for that submission? Is it impact, or is it, I suppose, spreading your professional reputation, communicating to other, to potential postgraduate students? There's a variety of reasons of why you want to publish in a certain place. And so it's high impact or somewhere else. Again, really just considering, what's your audience and what's your motivation behind publishing. Should you publish open access? So are you required to, for example, by the university or funder? And as I'll get on to, there's lots of good reasons other than that to publish open access, but increasingly there is kind of a mandate now when you get funding to publish your paper as open access. Who will read your paper? So dissemination. So how do you increase the readership of your papers? How do you increase the spread of people who actually have contact with your paper? What does the university or department require? And a strategy will save you time and help your career progression. So really worth your while thinking about all this before you write anything. So you'll have a nice strategy in place before you start. Why is research impact important? So lots of reasons. I mean, I suppose when you're more used to is the academic one, but increasingly there's this pressure from funders to be able to show the broader impact you're going to have. So, for example, the benefit to the economy, society, culture, public policy, or services, health, environment, or quality of life. So that's broader kind of cultural, societal, community kind of impact, apart from the regular academic one, which would be based around citation and impact. And of course, high impact is going to help your career progression and MU's rankings as well. So lots of benefits to be had from maximizing your research impact. So what are you publishing? So that's probably your first consideration. Are you publishing things like methodologies or results? Are you reviewing or summarizing a particular area? For example, you could be doing a systematic review or a scoping review or a rapid review. There's lots of different, review type papers you can do as well. Does it advance knowledge and understanding of a particular area? Of course, very important. That's the whole, I suppose, reason for academia, to advance understanding in certain areas. Don't publish something if there's no academic interest, out of date, duplication of existing published research. So, you will want to get, I suppose, maximize the number of papers you get out of a piece of research, but duplication isn't a good idea, or incorrect or unacceptable conclusions. Just be careful around what you publish, because obviously that will reflect back then on your academic reputation. Again, why publish? To exchange ideas, very important. To build your reputation and career, disseminate your work on a global scale. Have you got something new to say, a solution to a current or difficult problem, new development or a hot topic in your field? And ultimately, publishing is a necessary step in the research process. So we can do lots of research, but if we're not getting out there, if people aren't reading it, it's not advancing your subject area. What do you want to publish? So there's a variety, again, depending on what journal you're targeting, but there's a variety of different formats you can publish in. So is it going to be full articles, so offering original insights, suppose the kind of traditional type of article you might be used to publishing? Is it letters? That's a good way of communicating advances quickly, and some journals will focus on letters. That could be an important component in them. Reviews, so perspectives summarizing recent developments on a significant topic, and that's quite a good one, because that's often based off, secondary sources. So you're not doing original research, but you're providing a really useful review of current research, and that will tend to get quite a high readership and a lot of citations. So that's one that might be worthwhile looking at. And again, with that, there will be certain journals that would specialize in that. Conference papers. So if your research project, for example, is in progress, it's well worth your while speaking at conferences and getting published from that. And journals driving content can be an issue. So there is a trend, I suppose, where the journals are approaching you, asking you to write on certain topics, which is fine. But then if the the journals are controlling that completely. So, entire issues are around a particular topic. It can squeeze out maybe some of the research that you think is important to get out there, and you won't find, a vehicle for your voice as such. Okay, just increase that a bit. So where do you want to publish? Oh, why are they doing that then? Oh. So there'll be the traditional, I suppose, print e-journals and say versus open access. So generally for the e-journals, there's a choice between gold and open access and green open access options. So the gold is where you'd pay an article processing charge or not if it's part of one of our agreements. And the green option then would be like putting your paper into, self-archiving into an institution repository, like Mural, for example, the Maynooth one, or maybe, a repository that covers your subject area. That would be a kind of a place of note for your papers. Most of the European funders now are requiring that you put your papers out there in open access if you receive their funding. So just bear that in mind. And that would be particularly pushed by Plan S, running from 2020, that all publications that are research funded by public grants must be published in compliant open access journals or platforms. And again, it's that idea of, public money and the importance then of letting the public access the work. If you want to check your research funders' open access policies, that can be checked at the Sherpa Juliet website, which will go through the various policies of different publishers and what they allow, if there's an embargo for any period, and if they do allow you to publish open access, what version are you allowed to publish open access? Okay, so it's worthwhile looking at that. And then the article processing charges themselves, they might be covered by the open access agreements at universities, and you can check that on the library guide. And then there's hybrid journals as well. So some of the journals will be kind of a mixture between open access and pay-per-view. And they tend to be where people are paying the article processing charge to have their paper made available open access. And if they don't do that, it's still behind a paywall. Some journals would be nearly entirely open access. But again, there will be a charge for those. Then choices around academic, scholarly versus professional journals. And again, that's going to depend on who your readership is, what audience you want to target. And you'd balance that up then with how important, getting into the high impact journals is, as opposed to reaching out there to maybe professionals in your field, future postgrads, that kind of thing. Maybe it could be technical journals, journals of learned societies. There might be different avenues you might want to go into as well. Then there's a consideration between national level journals and international journals. So lots of great Irish journals, but they're not all included on databases like the Web of Science or Scopus, and they're the ones that are doing the citation tracking and measuring, the impact of journals and feeding into university rankings, that kind of thing. So if that's an important target for you, it's a tricky choice to make because it's also important, I suppose, to be in the Irish journals of note as well, from a career and, connectivity point of view. So it's something you'll have to weigh up yourself. Speaking to a home audience, for example, may be important. Then there's, I suppose, think of multi-inter-transdisciplinary journals. They can be useful. They can bring your research to a wider, broader audience, though it can be difficult to find a journal of sufficient quality that will cover your topic. And you need to be flexible in where you publish, and finding a journal that covers your theme. What does that journal want? You need to consider that and check out the guidelines and look at papers already published. And that kind of leads into this idea of, do people in the multidisciplinary, do they kind of really get your work? So with the editors and reviewers, how do you find someone who's actually qualified to assess your work as such? So while it might be appealing to go into a multidisciplinary journal, if the editors or the peer review team there aren't really understanding your work, that can be a problem for you. No clear evidence of increased citations overall, but science-related seems to do best in these. But science-related journals tend to do best anyway. So it's hard to kind of really track that. You do know you'll get your work to a broader audience, but whether that translates into actual citations is another matter. Okay. Selecting the journal. Some of the factors you might consider when selecting a journal. So other things to consider: the scope of the journal and the topical fit. So your research should be relevant to the journal you select, and to get an idea on that, look at the keywords in the journal, talk to colleagues. It's going to want to be a quality peer-reviewed journal. What's its reputation, the ethics of the journal? Who is the journal reaching? What's the audience for it? What's the impact of the journal? As I'll get on to, there's various ways of measuring the impact. Will it be read by your target audience? And just as a handy tip here, only about 30% of authors will write for a specific journal. And that's actually the way to increase your chance of acceptance. So if you're honing your article towards a particular journal, it's easier to get published than if you just write the article and then try and get it published. So you're kind of trying to find a home for it after you've written it. So a good tip would be to target your journal first before you write the paper. Okay, and then, hone it down to the kind of papers they like and hone it down to their audience. And particularly that's the case if you want to get into, one of the high impact journals. Okay. Then where are your peers publishing? So check out the journals in your field. So you can speak to librarians, colleagues, check out key authors in your field where they publish. And as I get onto, you can check that on the various citation databases. Just, research other authors that you know are maybe top in your field and just see what their strategy is, particularly if they're longer, maybe in the game than you are. Check out publishers' websites. Then bibliographic database like Scopus, Skymaga, Web of Science. And in there, you can check out journal titles, rankings, and you can also research, authors, departments, university profiles. So if you knew, there's a certain university who are top in a certain field, you can go in and look at them and just do a quick search in there and see what they're up to and what their strategy is. And you can also check surface service journal listings, and that will include publishers' copyright policies and self-archiving policies as well. So well worth your while doing that. Just a bit more on that as well. Other considerations, the peer review process. So which is your favorite peer review process? And that'll vary between journals as well. So do you want the single blind, the double blind, the open review? Single blind, obviously, they know who you are, you don't know who they are. Double blind, nobody knows who anybody is. And open review, everybody knows who everybody is. But even with the double blind, there's a good chance the reviewer will probably, especially if you're kind of well known in the field, they get a sense of who you might be or the type of papers that you submit. Turnaround times, how quickly e-publication is available, that can be important. Acceptance and rejection rates, again, shouldn't be a key thing, but you're only going to be submitting your paper to one journal at a time. That's what they prefer anyway. And so, if you're fearful of being rejected, that might be a consideration. But on the other hand, though, you might want to go for the journal that you really want to be in. But just things to consider. Who's on the editorial board is another one. If you feel there might be a bit of bias there, that could be worth considering. If you're a bit cutting edge and you decide the editorial board isn't really cutting edge, that could be a problem. Or you feel they won't really get your work, that might be a consideration. Open access options, then, as I've mentioned, does it allow green open access deposition, or is there a gold option? And if there is a gold option, maybe is it covered by one of the deals we'd have with publishers, so they'll waive that article processing charge? That could be a consideration. Does the author retain copyright? And you can check the Creative Commons license. And there will be kind of preferred minute versions of that, which we can advise you on. Different Creative Commons licenses. Is the journal indexed in major databases? So you could check the matter like Web of Science, Scopus, JSTOR, other databases in your discipline, and just see, is it indexed in those? Because that's going to increase the discoverability of your paper. So if people are searching in those databases, it'd be useful to make sure that you're actually going to be indexed in them. Then the journal ranking metrics, so things like journal impact factor, scientific journal rankings, source normalized impacts, they're all ones that can be checked as well. And I'm going to talk about those again in a minute. And then article level metrics, so number of downloads, citations. You can kind of track your own impact, see the interest you're getting in your papers. This is just a little bit of information I found from this interesting report, the data from the Global State of Peer Review report. And it's just a bit on that whole peer review thing. So the interesting one, for example, 10% of reviewers are responsible for 50% of peer review. So you can see it's quite a focused little area. So you need to think about that whole peer review process thing. Difficulty in getting peer reviewers. Okay, 71% of decline review requests because the article is outside their area of expertise. So as I mentioned, this area of finding a person that's expert in your area can be challenging. Decline because they're too busy. 39% never receive any peer review training. So there's a lot of issues around it that you'll probably have to take into account when you're deciding where to publish. And again, just a bit more detail on these. I'll circulate these slides so you'll be able to have a quick look at those as well yourself. And this is that report I mentioned, this 2018 Global State of Peer Review, which is quite interesting. And there's a link to it there if you want to have a look at that. Again, if it's an area that you're concerned about or interested in, you can go in there and there's a lot of detail in there. And that's a report that's put out by Claravatu on Web of Science and then Publons. So, quite eminent companies, so worth a look at those. And this is just an example. This is another survey that was done in 2015, and they're looking at emerging trends. They're talking about the whole classical peer review, things about slowing down, it's unreliable, there's unethical practices, lack of recognition for unpaid reviewers, which can be a problem. And they're seeing two major trends. So the rapidly expanding role of preprint services, we've all seen that, that's the thing. Preprints are even appearing on the main database like Web of Science now. And they're dispensing with so things like ARXV are dispensing with traditional peer review altogether. And there's also growth of non-selective review, focusing on paper scientific quality rather than perceived importance and novelty. Also, increased interest in open review. So you remove reviewer anonymity. But the strongest findings there is the persistence of major difference between the peer review process used by different disciplines. So the process is quite different depending on your discipline. So again, depending on what area you're in, you'd need to investigate that and just see how that process works in your area and see how you can approach that in the way that's most beneficial to you. And all I can really say is coming years, continued diversification. And they're kind of the 2015, 2018, they're not as recent as you might like, but they seem to be the most current studies done on that area anyway, if that's what you're interested in. Just a quick mention of predatory publishing while I'm there. Won't go into it too much, but predatory publishing, it tends to be, you get those emails after a conference you've been at telling you how wonderful you are and how important it is should you speak at their conference or submit a paper to their journal, but just be careful around those. A lot of them do, basically what they're doing is they're just collecting content for which you pay a fee and then they'll publish you, but you want to be really careful around the quality of those journals because that will affect your academic record negatively if you're not publishing in good quality journals. Just be careful. It is tempting because they do tend to offer quite speedy service, but just to watch out for that. And these are just some of the checks you might want to think about. Do you know the journal? Is it included on the well-known databases? Is it in Ulrich's periodicals directory? Have you been approached directly? Do they seem persistent, aggressive? Have they suggested it'll be published quickly? Have they clearly explained the costs involved in it? They typically won't until the thing's well advanced. Is there evidence of a peer review process? If there is an editorial board, do they check out? There might be some good names there, but if you contact them, do they even know they're on the editorial board? Do they know they're supposed to be doing the peer review? Does this thing really stand up? Look at the journal website. Where is it located? What's the quality of existing articles? So go in and have a scan of the articles that are up there. And do they kind of cut mustard? Do they seem of a quality that you'd expect? If they're quoting an impact factor, can you verify this on the Journal Citation Report database? So that'd be a database like Web of Science and Scopus, who would collate the Journal Citation Reports. So do they match up, or is it kind of a bogus one? And this is just a handy tool that will help you with that. So think, check, submit. And if you go in that, it'll kind of bring you through that whole process of, choosing the right journal for your research and warning you of any dangers around predatory journals. Okay. Just generally looking for titles. I mentioned some of these already: Ulrich's, Scopus, Web of Science, JSTOR, any of the EBSCO databases, British Education Index, the ProQuest databases, these are two just platforms we use. So Australian Education Index, ERIC, Social Science, Sociological Abstracts. You can have a look at Google Scholar data as well. Harzing is a social scientist and currently working in the UK, and she's produced a bit of software called Publish or Perish, which you can analyze the data that's in Google Scholar. But they also have a listing of a journal quality list, which I will show you a bit more on in a minute. And the journal finding tools on various databases. I'm going to show you what they look like now. Just generally, there are some subjects as well that aren't particularly well represented on the databases. That is improving, but there still is a feeling that they're not quite there yet. And some other listings have emerged. So for example, in law, there's the Washington and Lee Law Journal submission rankings listing, Financial Times top 50 business schools listing, Chartered Association of Business Schools listings, European Reference Index of Humanities Social Sciences. So there's a lot of these other listings that you'll probably be aware of in your subject area that will identify kind of the journals of note in your area. And then, but if you wanted to measure the impact of databases, okay, and these impact measures, so they attempt to quantify the importance of a particular journal in its field via an algorithm that takes into account the number of articles published per year and the number of citations to articles published in that journal. Okay, so it is a quantitative measure as opposed to maybe a qualitative one, like say like an altmetrics tool that'll measure the interaction with your papers, the communication around your papers. This is a quantitative thing. It's counting citations. And in Web of Science, they have journal citation reports and the journal impact factor. Scopus have a tool called Compare Sources, which compares one journal with another, and then a sources journal listing, which you can filter by subject areas. And we'll use a few different measures. For example, the CITE score, which is just a number of citations. The SJR, the scientific journal ranking, includes the prestige of a journal. And then source normalized impact includes kind of what you might expect in that subject area, which is probably the fairest one. It's a more balanced view of it. But a few different scores there. SkyMago work off the Scopus data, and they break it down a bit more by subject area, regional categories, and so on. Then Skyval, also Elsevier, sits on top of Scopus, and you can benchmark at a higher level. So you can look at yourself as an individual, look at your publications where you're publishing. You can also do that at a group or institutional level. So you can create researcher groups. You can go into thousands of different institutions and you'll see how they're doing and break them down by subject area, analyze where they're publishing, all that kind of stuff. And then Google Scholar as well. There's Google Citations tool you can use and the Harzang list of quality. But as the health warning comes, all metrics are based on specific data sets. But just to bear in mind, Scopus is the one used for university rankings at the moment. So that's probably the one that Maynooth will pay most attention to, because that's where our rankings are coming from. So that if you're particularly interested in that whole process of tapping into publishing in high impact journals that are then feeding into the university rankings, you want to be going for high ranking journals that are indexed in Scopus. And this is just a bit more on the different metrics. So the journal impact factor itself, this is the one in Web of Science. Impact factor journal is calculated by dividing the current year citations up to the source items published in that journal during the previous 2 or 5 years. And you'll see this in different databases. They have variations on what they think is statistically significant. So Web of Science would have started out with 2 years, they're now 5 years generally to measure that impact. And in the numbers produced, anything more than 1 is more than average, So if you're seeing an impact of, 5, 8, whatever it is, that's pretty good. Like you're well above world average. Then in Scopus, they have the site score. So that's the average per document that a title receives over a 3-year period. They go for a 3-year period. SJR, number of citations, plus the influence and rank of the journal they come from. So they're taking into account the prestige of that journal. That gives them a little boost as well. And then SNP, source normalized impact paper, number of citations and weighted by subject area, which of course is very important because, as you probably know, depending on your subject area, there are differences in this. Sciences tend to get higher readerships. They publish more papers. In turn, they get more citations. So you'll see the citation counts will be much higher for science journals. Humanities tend to be, they publish less articles, and they might have a good readership, but they're probably getting less citations. So those ranks just won't be as high, but they try and balance that up. So you're kind of comparing with like. It's a little bit fair. Okay. And you notice that actually if you're publishing in multidisciplinary journals that have a bit of a, kind of a sciencey kind of side to them, they will tend to get more citations, more readership. So no matter what, if you're publishing in education and you're doing that into computers or technology, you're going to get more citations than if you're kind of in a more theoretical side of things. Okay, so this is what Web of Science looks like, and in there you have lists there. You can go journal listings, categories, publishers, countries, and regions, whichever suits you. And this is for their journal citation reports. So there's categories by group, for example, under the different disciplines, and there's your journals within that and numbers of citable items. And this is just broken down now biology, for example, sorted by journal impact factor. So you can see the number in there. So that when they're physics of life reviews, that's 11.7. So if you're bearing in mind if 1 is world average, that's pretty good. Then you've bioscience, biological reviews, PLOS, current biology, Science China, eLife. Another thing just to point out with those as well, as I say up there, see the open access, and people would often be wary of open access because they feel that it doesn't cite as highly, but the 3 of those now in the top, 7 in there are open access journals, basically. That one's 98% open access, that one is 99% open access. So that kind of thing is changing, this idea that open access journals won't get you citations, they will, which certainly proves it here. So if you're keen to get into the open access journals, you could perhaps focus on one of those if they're outside those kind of deals with for open access. Then Scopus sources is another one. So you're going to Scopus sources, and again, you can break it down by subject area, okay, or title, whichever kind of suits you. Health warning comes with any of these subject areas, by the way. This is their algorithm deciding what belongs in a certain subject area. Okay, so just if you're in those kind of like geography, for example, you might find journals just aren't included in that. They might have, managed to get into different subject areas. Just be a bit careful around that. But again, cell biology, sorted by SNP in this case, source normalized. Again, there's the rankings there. Nature's reviews molecular cell biology, and you can see there, huge scores. that rapidly decline. So that one now, Nature Reviews, molecular cell biology, is ahead by a long way. So that would be your target in that case, if that subject area applied to you. Scopus compare sources, again, you can go in, you can compare a couple of journals with each other and track them here, map them out, and then percentage not cited, percentage review articles, handy, so that's telling you there's a lot of review articles perhaps. Documents, percent not cited. So this is telling you the percentage not cited is very low in these, which in turn means if you're getting published there, very high chance of getting cited. And again, you can see one is much stronger in terms of review articles. So again, if you're going for that one, which is the annual reviews of plant biology. So you're going to be putting a review article in there if you're going to choose there where to publish. Excuse me. Now, SkyMago journal and country rank, again, using the Scopus data set, looks a bit different. I like it because you can kind of filter down a bit more in terms of subject area and also geographic areas, which is quite nice. So you could filter down to just Ireland, for example, if you wanted to. And again, there's your SJR. So that's your one that includes the prestige of the journal, the scientific journal ranking. There's your numbers there for that. And again, you can click into those and it'll give you, details on that journal as well. Google Scholar Metrics, again, this is one of their functions, top publications. And there's their listing there for top publications. And with that as well, you can go in overall or go in by categories or subcategories, depending on what journal you're interested in. And that's their index, and they're the H index. So they're published in the last 5 complete years. So a bit more of a stretch than some of the other ones. So just to bear that in mind. Scopus, for example, was 3 years. This is the Harzing Journal Quality List that I mentioned. Looks a bit like that. And again, you can click into that and look at their listing of journal qualities. Okay, a bit more detail. And they focus mainly on economics, finance, accounting, management, and marketing. And again, they're listed by title and subject areas. That's the Harzing one that you can go into. And as I mentioned, there's software you can download with them as well that will actually analyze Google Scholar data for you as well. Now, the other side of things is that's one thing is tracking individual journals, which is very useful. What you can also do, as I mentioned at the start, is track key authors, departments, or institutions for research trends and where they are publishing. So again, if you knew a certain university was strong in a certain area or a certain academic, you can go in and analyze them. Okay. So Scopus and SkyVal are Web of Science. So in there, you can search for prestigious authors and co-authors in your field, analyze their outputs. So where are they publishing? What subject area are they publishing in? And then rank the journals they're publishing in. So it's a handy way of just doing a bit of investigation before, again, where you decide where you want to publish. So this is the Scopus author or affiliation search. So there's John Ringwood there, and you get an analysis Scopus, his H index, but you can dig down into that and just get a listing of, there's his topics, and you can get down into, where he's publishing and have a look at that. This is a detail here from just affiliation search in Scopus of what Maynooth looks like overall. And again, you can go in by subject area and dig down a bit in there and just see, what's going on, where are we publishing, what kind of material are we publishing, and so on. For SkyVal, and to get into SkyVal, I should say, what you do is you register with Scopus and then use the same login just to click through into SkyVal. And I'll show you at the end of a few minutes just to show you what they look like in real life. But again, with this one, you can either go in by Maynooth overall look, or else you can also create groups by research or department if you want to. And they cover 22,000 research institutes from more than 230 nations worldwide. So it's huge. So if you know there's kind of comparable universities to Maynooth, for example, you can go in and have a little dig around and see what they're up to and how they're approaching. And particularly if you know they're a top ranking university, you kind of see what they're up to. And you see loads of ways of filtering them. I just have it there by published. And there you can go by journal quartile, research area, sustainable development goals. If you're interested in doing that, if you want to find out, where the research being published around sustainable development goals, where they're publishing, you can look at that as well. And there's a little chart of the Maynooth by subject area, where we're currently publishing. And again, you can dig down into that if that's something you think would be useful. Just to mention a few tools as well. You'll see these popping up in a lot of journals you're in. So EndNote Online has a matching tool. And the idea of all these is you put in a bit of detail, your title or your abstract, and they'll suggest journals to publish in. EndNote is owned by Clarivat, formerly known as Thomson Reuters. So obviously that might be a bit of a bias there. Elsevier Journal Finder, and obviously they're connected with Scopus, Science Direct, SkyVal, and so on. Find the right journal for your research. PubMed Reminer, a little different. You do a search and it'll just suggest journals around your topic. Quite a useful tool. Springer Journal Suggester. You've probably seen some of these just in your general research. Find a journal. Jane, this is the journal author name estimator, and this searches all the journals in Medline that have published content in the last year. Okay, questions around the currency, but it still seems to be quite good. And again, you can get suggestions there of where to publish. Wiley have one, Wiley Journal Finder. This is the European Reference Index for the Humanities Social Science. Again, have a look in there. It'll give you listings of journals, and again, might give you some ideas of places you can publish in, and have links there for that. Core, another one, this Computer Research and Education. Another journal guide, journalguide.com, find the best journal for your research, and this is a growing database, so that could be useful. So lots of these tools out there, I suppose they want to help you and they want your content, so they're putting the tools out there. And just before I finish as well, I just want to say something about open access. I mentioned at the beginning, but increasingly an area that, it's generally considered it's a good thing to do, and it's also there's pressure from funders to take part in it. So just to point out some of the benefits of it, more exposure for your work. Obviously, it's open to everybody. Practitioners can apply your findings, and particularly in the case when there's increasingly open data available as well. Higher citation rates, so you can imagine people are reading your papers, you're going to get more citations. Hooking into policy, so government bodies, they can get straight into your papers rather than going through paywalls, so it could influence policy. Public can access your findings, so all those non-academic researchers are just people generally interested, can get into your work. You're complying with grant rules, taxpayers get value for money, researchers in developing countries can you see your work. So it's great for that narrative of, I suppose, showing that a really broad spectrum of people can access your work, and just some more benefits that I've kind of covered there as well. Raising your profile internationally, profile of Maynooth, you as an Irish researcher, space for individual research, students, culture displayed research work. So it's all that thing about creating a narrative, getting your research profile out there, and and helping other researchers as well while you're at it. And again, just having their readership, author visibility, citations, downloads. And actually, you can track all that on the Maynooth Institution repository as well. So you can track who is downloading your papers, numbers on that, and then use that when you want to make a case for the impact of your papers. And I say generally, it's democratization of academic output, and helped by open access agreements with IRO, the article processing charges, and then the growth of repositories as well. Okay. Directory of open access journals. So again, good quality listing if you want to check out open access journals, and that's where the like Scope or some of the science would pull gold open access journals that they index as well. So it's a good quality list, because again, if you're not sure about the quality of some open access journals, that's the place to look. So you're going to find the good ones. Sherpa Services do that as well, and this is 192 brings you open access compliance and traditional agreements lookup tools. So it's going to tell you about how to be compliant with any funders' requests, copyright restrictions by publishers, but also any transitional agreements lookup tools. So it'll tell you about what journals are covered by various agreements. You can check that there as well. Open access publishing. Again, another option for publishing. Start your own journal, which is quite healthy. Maynooth, there's a few there at the moment. Jan's called Journal of Mediation, Applied Complex Analysis, Journal of Military History, Defense Studies, Open Journal of Astrophysics. So again, that is a solution. If you feel that there's a place there, you need a platform for your type of research, for your study area, that could be a consideration to just, and the library can advise you on that, of setting up your own open access publication. Research visibility generally, lots of articles published every year, many thousands of journals, so how do you get yours spotted? Okay, citation rates can be quite low. Say medicine, science is about 12% aren't cited. Humanities could be 80% not cited. Natural sciences 27%, 32% for social science. So huge disparities between different subject areas and number of citations. So anything you can do to kind of bump that up a bit is going to be good. Some quick ideas on that. And again, I'm happy to meet any of you about this if you wanted to go into this in more depth. Set up your research ideas, and they're available in Web of Science and Scopus. And that'll give you an author ID number, which you can then attach to your email or any place, applying for jobs, for funding. People can get straight into all your papers, can see what your work is. Export them to ORCID. You've probably heard about ORCID. A great resource. Again, you can create your profile in there, that you get a unique ORCID ID that you can use. Again, put that onto any your communications you have, whether it's your social media, your email, whatever it is. And again, that'll bring you into a list of your publications. You can also make available your CV, your funding, all that kind of stuff. So anything that you want to publicize about yourself or your work, ORCID is great for that. And you can link those ideas to your social media. Get your papers up on Maynooth Researcher Information System. Great again for getting your papers out there. When people go in and look at your profile, make sure your papers are there. Google Scholar Citations profile, useful as well. Pull all your papers in there, and then you can also generate a little kind of profile of yourself, your publications, the citations you've got, all that. Get yourself out in social media, whatever one you like to use, whether it's blogging or you like to use Twitter. Twitter seems particularly popular in Maynooth. And when you're doing that, make sure you put in the handles of people that you think are going to be interested, and a direct link to the full text of your paper. So whether that's the publisher's website or an institution repository, it needs to all connect together. You connecting with your readers, connecting with the full text, and so on. Document publishing, again, you can put it up, source code on GitHub, data on Figshare. Hopefully we'll have our own data repository soon. You can get your data up there. I think SlideShare, Scribed, lots of places you can put your papers up. Put them into Muro, Maynooth Institution Repository, or if there's a subject-related one that's important for your subject area, put them there. Put them somewhere, I suppose is the point. Make yourself findable by linking up your research title. So that's when you're writing your paper. Keep the title simple, match your title to your keywords, bearing in mind people are looking for your papers online. So you need to make it easier for them to make those connections so they find your papers. Conferences, do posters, presentations, get your name out there, collaborations with other academics, go for the high-ranking journals if you can, and keep an eye on your digital footprint. So who's citing me, who's downloading me, who's viewing me, who's mentioning me, all that kind of stuff. And so we have altmetric tools to do that as well, so you can kind of track all that other conversation about your papers other than citations. And I'm happy to talk to people about that as well if they're interested in that area. Key points, just so be clear in your motivation for writing and identify your target reader and publication. Check the quality and impact ranking of the journal you're interested in. Beware of predatory journals. Plan how to improve the visibility and dissemination of your papers. Very important. Planning in all things, very important. Track your citations and who's interested in your papers and aware of how they're accessing them. Track others in the research area and see where they publish and how to promote that output, and use the information to inform your dissemination plan. So just have those plans in place. Just to point out, I have a few guides on this. The links are there in the slides as well, which I'll be circulating, but you'll find them in the guides and tutorial section of the library page as well in research support. So I have one there on academic journal publishing where I look at visibility, where to publish, Maynooth guidelines, and then open publishing at Maynooth. I also have one on measuring research impact as well. So you can go into that, have a look at that, and I have bits in there on alternative metrics and citation tracking as well. Okay. Feel free to contact me. Thank you for listening. That is my email address. So hopefully I haven't gone too far over time, but if any people have any questions at this stage, I would be happy to take them. There might be something in chat as well.
Thanks very much, Ciarán.